Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I can see all of you very well, so I'm going to be looking out into the audience and see who I recognize. I'm D++, and I am a Bitcoin educator. I'm also a professor of Bitcoin. And today I am here to talk about my favorite thing ever. Can anybody guess what that is? Bitcoin. We're going to talk about Bitcoin. I have been tasked with a tall order, and that is answering the question, what is Bitcoin? Now, this is actually kind of a challenging question to answer. And the reason for this is because Bitcoin is multidisciplinary. It's a puzzle comprised of distinct pieces from distinct fields of study. But in our hyper-specialized world, it's rare to come across a person who has expertise in even more than one particular field. Now, if I were to ask all of you in the audience, what is Bitcoin? I might get as many answers as there are you. And that is because Bitcoin means different things to different people. Bitcoin is a mirror in this regard, in that it reflects back to you things about yourself, things that you're interested in, things that you hold dear, and even your own morals. So speaking of all of you, let's get acquainted. How many of you would say you're newer to Bitcoin? Okay, and how many of you are Bitcoin OGs? You've been in the trenches, you're veterans, you were there for the fork wars. This is not your first cycle. Okay, and how many of you are somewhere in between? All right. Now, how many of you are technologists, meaning you program or you work in tech? And how many of you are not in a technical field? Okay, so like half and half. How many of you mine Bitcoin? That can be mining at home or mining at scale. All right, well, it's wonderful that you're all here. I'm so excited to dive into this topic of what is Bitcoin. Now, we mentioned that Bitcoin is multidisciplinary. While Bitcoin, of course, is part computer science and cryptography, it's also part game theory. It's also part network effects. While it's part monetary policy, economics, and finance, it's also part philosophy. It's also part energy. And it's also part memes. And it's part all of us, the humans who use it. Now, the problem is, if you were to zoom too far into one of these parts, you run the risk of missing Bitcoin entirely. For example, if you were to go looking for Bitcoin in its code base on the GitHub repository, you might miss what Bitcoin actually is. So what is Bitcoin? If we zoom out, which I recommend doing, from a bird's eye view, in 3 words, Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is money. Okay, so, but To answer the question, what is Bitcoin, we must first answer the question, what is money? The majority of us spend our waking hours working to procure this thing that so few of us have actually stopped to wonder, what actually is it? Our school was of little help because very few of us learned what money was in school. And we didn't learn what money was on the job either. So, what is money? Money is a mechanism that facilitates trade between two parties who don't know each other and who don't trust one another. So let's think of an example. Imagine Bob doesn't know me and doesn't trust me, but he has a cow that I want, and that cow required work, required effort for him to raise to maturity. It was costly for him to raise this cow, and he put a lot of time and effort and love into him. So if I don't have anything that Bob wants, which is to say we don't have a double coincidence of wants, what can I give him in exchange for that cow? What can I give him that will store value across time and space? Well, that thing that Bob wants is money. Bob wants money. So would Bob, for example, accept a huge pile of dirt in exchange for his cow? How many think yes? How many think no? Probably not. And why? Dirt did not require any work to procure. And Bob's cow did. So Bob wants something in exchange that also required work. Dirt also isn't scarce. So what are some of the other properties that money must have if Bob is to give up his beloved cow? Let's ask the audience. Fungibility, that's a weird word. It means interchangeability, right? So one unit is interchangeable for another unit. What other properties should Bob's money have? Durability. It better not disintegrate after he exchanges his cow for this money. What else? Scarce. It needs to be scarce. Bob worked so hard to raise that cow, so he wants something that's fungible, that's scarce, and that's durable. Are there any other properties that Bob wants for his money? Well, it needs to not be easily counterfeit, and it needs to be verifiable. How about portable and divisible? So throughout thousands of years, humans have converged upon forms of money that have optimized for these properties that we just described. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, the money in my bank account doesn't actually have all of those properties. So, for one, the money in our bank accounts did not require human effort to be produced. It required effort to be earned. But there was no effort that went into the production of those monetary units. Now, in theory, this form of money that has value not because it required work, but because the issuer says it has value. Because the issuer gives it value by decree. This form of money could, in theory, work. But the root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. And what did those breaches of that trust lead to? What are some examples of what those breaches of trust might cause? Inflation. What else? Wars. Because the only way to pay for war at scale on a global level is through the dishonest and secretive debasement of the monetary supply itself. So these little debasement problems of money turns out to be devastating for humans on this planet. And if you're lucky enough to have access to US dollars, you benefit from financial privilege. With the majority, 53% of people on Earth, having no access to banking, the majority living under authoritarian regimes, with billions having limited to no access to financial services. But humans are smart. So what has prevented these people from creating their own form of money? A form of money that cannot be debased, a form of money that they can trade amongst one another. We've been smart enough to create transistors and integrated circuits and the internet. So what's to stop us from creating a money of the people that does not require trust? Well, it turns out this problem was an unsolvable problem in computer science. Does anybody know what this problem's called? The double spend problem. The double spend problem, generally in computer science, is referred to as the Byzantine generals problem. And as smart as cryptographers and computer scientists are, they could not find a way to create a decentralized, distributed network without a trusted authority and come into a consensus or agreement. But why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to find consensus? Let's imagine for a moment that all of us together are creating a new form of digital cash that's fully peer-to-peer with no trusted third party. Okay? So we have a ledger, which is to say we have a list of how much money everybody has, along with a history of everyone's transactions. Simple, right? How is that an unsolvable problem in computer science? So I have a copy of the ledger. Bob has a copy of the ledger. Alice has a copy of the ledger. Carol and Diane have copies of the ledger. But what if they have different transactions on their copies and in different orders? We could have an infinite number of diverging copies of this ledger. And how do I know which one is the correct one to pay attention to? The one ledger to rule them all. Where do we look? There's no one telling us to look here at a centralized authority. So how do we agree? How do we form consensus? So let's say that I want Bob's cow, and I give him one of these new monetary units in exchange for it. He updates his ledger to say that he is now the proud owner of that unit of money. I got the cow. Great. But what's to stop me from giving that same unit of money to Alice in exchange for her chickens? She updates her ledger to say that she is now the proud owner of that unit of money. I now have Bob's cow and hundreds of Alice's chickens. They have diverging copies of the ledger, which is to say that I double spent those funds. And what's to stop me from triple or quadruple spending the funds? So computer scientists are smart. And in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, they worked on solving this problem. You may recognize names such as David Chaum, Nick Szabo, Wei Dai, Hal Finney, Adam Back. But their attempts at creating this decentralized money had one common problem. And that was they still needed that trusted authority in order to work. Until something magical happened. It was spooky season, which is to say, it was Halloween, October 31st of 2008. A pseudonymous cypherpunk by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto came out of nowhere and provided a solution to the Byzantine general's problem, a problem believed to be unsolvable in computer science. And how did he do that? What was the solution? Satoshi decided to attach work, computational work, to this digital ledger, cryptographically. Work that would be difficult to produce, that would require effort, time, and hardware. Work that would be impossible to forge, or shortcut, or fake. And yet that would be trivially easy to verify by anyone. In ascribing work to the digital world, Satoshi outsourced that hard work that humans used to have to do to create money, not just to earn money, but to create money itself. He outsourced it to computers. Let's let the computers do the work for us. And in marrying the digital world with the physical world, Satoshi anchored this form of money into physics, into nature, and even into time, creating an immutable time chain. Satoshi discovered digital scarcity, which before 2008 had never existed. Now, going back to early primitive forms of money, there was that one thing they all had in common. They all required work. They all required effort to be created. Satoshi's invention is no different. Now, once this network has been sufficiently bootstrapped into existence and secured against attackers, no one, regardless of how much computational energy they have or how much money they have, can change the rules of that protocol. It's a system of rules without rulers. so too, there does not need to be an additional creation of something that itself was the discovery of the resistance to replicatability. The planet does not need to rediscover digital scarcity because it is a once-in-a-species invention. Which is to say that Bitcoin is not just the most extraordinary thing that humans have created in our lifetime. It's actually the most extraordinary thing that humans have ever created in the history of our planet. It cannot be recreated on a planet in which has understanding of a proof-of-work network. So if these rules can't be changed, and if this monetary policy is fair, meaning if you lie or cheat or steal, you simply get ignored. But lying and cheating and stealing took effort. It was costly to do so, meaning you wasted all of that effort and were ignored. So what does a world look like that's built upon such a system of truth? What are some of the qualities of that world? What do the people value in that world? Now, I invite you to just for a moment, close your eyes and imagine one detail of a world built on truth. That detail can be something small, like shrinkflation has been obsoleted. Items don't have to get smaller and smaller every year due to the rising cost of inflation. Or it could be something as earth-shattering as war has been dematerialized because it is impossible in this world to profit from it. Now, I want you to hold this detail in your mind and in your heart and in your whole body. Because if enough people think the same way, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it might make sense just to get some Bitcoin in case it catches on. Now, our time together is coming to a close. So after all that, if you don't believe me or you don't get it, I don't have the time to try to convince you. Sorry.
Welcome back. I'm Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine, and we're here at Bitcoin Amsterdam, broadcasting live from Europe's largest Bitcoin conference. Appreciate you sticking with us on YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble. Joined once again by Isabella Santos and Jack Lee. We just heard from D++ giving her speech for What is Bitcoin? Would love to talk to you guys about your elevator pitches when you introduce the subject. Isabella, when you explain what is Bitcoin, how do you answer that question?
My easy answer would be, do you work for your money? All right. And if you put your money in the bank, when you want to remove all your money from the bank asks you, why do you need your money? Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin doesn't need you to ask for permission. It is your money, your hard-earned money, and it returns your power to yourself. We're not giving the power to the banks, which are privately owned. So I feel like it is our revolution. So we're fighting against the fiat system right now.
Bitcoin, the people's money. Jack, your elevator pitch, obviously a different audience, institutions. Yes. Tell us your pitch.
Sure. Yeah, I would say Bitcoin is digital money. It's just like treated as a digital gold, right? Because we have been living in the digital age for maybe 3 decades. So in the internet, so we need a better form of money. I mean, not back to the old day of the gold. We need a vault to store the physical thing, and then slow to transfer, also verify. So we have Satoshi Nakamoto invent this kind of a digital peer-to-peer cash system, can help people store their value, store the Bitcoin through the proof of work, through the energy back. So this is and also it's a decentralized monetary system to be, right? So won't be censored, won't be freeze, won't be someday someone take away your Bitcoin, even like a crypto exchange. So you can do self-custody, as we talked earlier, to store your wealth, store your asset. So this is the first time in human history. It's the hard money, hard asset is hard to be confiscated, can be taken away through your private key, right? You can keep the asset anywhere in the world.
And we've heard a lot about that today with the monetary system and Bitcoin as money, but we're going to turn it to this afternoon. We're going to hear a lot of different conversations on stage. One of them we have upcoming is going to be focused on the Ordinals protocol. I've heard a little bit about that, this idea that art, digital artifacts, NFTs coming to Bitcoin. Jack, would love to stick with you. What are your thoughts on whether this adds value to what's going on with the Bitcoin movement?
Yeah, for whatever good technology or good product revolution, always there's some noise. Or sometimes the noise is good, sometimes it's a noise. So, I would say, just like an email, right? Been 40 years. Always there's a junk, there's a spam email, right? It took up some server space, but it's always there. You cannot get rid of, right? But sometimes it's good for more people to know about Bitcoin. I think especially in the early day, right? Email has been 40 years, right, or more. But it's early day for people to know about Bitcoin and know about there's some fancy thing. But still, ultimately, just like those holding those shitcoin thing, right? Ultimately, they will come to Bitcoin as a store of value, right?
So it sounds like you're coming out against Ordinals. You think they're spam. Isabella, do you think that they're adding to what's going on in Bitcoin in a significant way?
I think it's interesting that seeing Bitcoin evolve in that way, giving it an ability for the artists to put their work on Bitcoin. I like seeing that. I like seeing how other people are getting involved, especially seeing how NFTs had such a downfall. We saw a couple years ago, NFTs were the talk of the town, and now nobody wants to involve in any NFT projects. So seeing them switch over on the Bitcoin blockchain is interesting. I've seen a couple projects from NFTs put themselves on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's interesting to see. I don't have a personal hate relationship towards it or a love relationship. So I just want to see how it can evolve. But I do know that it's making the Bitcoin developers more interested in innovating.
Don't we want a Bitcoin circular economy, right? This was talked about earlier today. We had Joe Hall on stage talking about Bitcoin and communities. We have to be at some point spending Bitcoin, using Bitcoin for transactions. Do you agree, Jack?
Yeah, definitely. More people involved for whatever interaction, engagement. I think it's good for more people. We have over 8 billion people in the world, right? Still,
if you look at the Ethereum, other crypto ecosystems, right? People are denominating in ETH. They're holding money in ETH. This has been an adoption tactic that maybe appears effective for them. You disagree?
Yeah, still digital asset, that's also interesting topic. Also involved with some technology revolution, some breakthrough. Those people maybe they think Bitcoin is too boring, right? It's too simple. Then they want to do those creative things. But I think, again, just like what they are trying to do, the Web3, right? Is the next generation of a Google. It's a good project. I don't mind. I think it's a good way to go for those kind of creativity. However, if you're back to the money, just like what we talk about the gold, talk about US dollar, right? Talk about this kind of a storehold of value, I think that only be Bitcoin, right?
Well, we're going to have to send it back to the main stage. Appreciate you sticking with us. If you have some questions, ask them on YouTube, ask them on Rumble, and ask them on Twitter. Still to come, Stella Assange, Balaji Srinivasan, and Edward Snowden here at Bitcoin Amsterdam. We'll be back after the break.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.